Memory is one of the most important themes in Honkai Star Rail. It's intertwined within every major quest in the game, with several characters, factions, and locations serving as embodiments of the idea. Some things, though, are probably better left forgotten. Pella's Canon Age, Original Mosevie, Racist Sparkle, you name it. But there's one chapter in Star Rail's controversial history that was so remarkably terrible, it's impossible to forget no matter how much you want to. Let's talk about the first, and definitely last, Honkai Star Rail Collab. We're giving away 3 Star Rail monthly passes to the community. Subscribers who comment on this video and at least one other on the channel will have a chance to win. And I'll be reaching out to the winners in the second week of November to deliver the passes to your account. Best of luck in the giveaway, and thank you to our sponsor for making this possible, LDShop. Gacha games are an expensive hobby, but with LDShop, they don't have to be. LDShop is a safe and reliable game top-up site created by LD Player Emulator, which offers unbeatable prices for Wineric shards and other in-game purchases in Honkai Star Rail, as well as Genshin Impact, Wuthering Waves, and other games. If you use the affiliate link below, you'll receive a 15 and 5% off coupon, which can save you up to $50 in Honkai Star Rail purchases. All you need is your server and game ID to top up, and if you spend over $80 in 1 month at LDShop, you'll get a free supply pass. Thank you to LDShop for sponsoring this video, and be sure to check them out using the link in the pinned comment and description. On April 20th, 2024, Hoyoverse shocked the world by announcing a Honkai Star Rail x Fate collab, bridging together 2 titans of the gacha gaming sphere. This came completely out of left field, since Hoyo had never done a collab with any of their major IPs before, much less with a franchise as big as Fate. It was also one of the only instances of something that substantial getting past leakers entirely. Needless to say, people were hyped. Or at least that's what the Star Rail ads that were shoved into your face before every single YouTube video you were about to watch wanted you to know. But it was an undoubtedly exciting time to be either a Star Rail fan or a Fate fan, and for people like myself who are both, this couldn't be more promising. Just thinking of the possibilities. All the different characters that would be coming out, the creative and engaging ways that they'd be adapting the characters as kits, the fascinating story and rich lore they'd be delivering. Another Lancer death. Things couldn't be looking more up. If nothing else, and I assure you, there is nothing else, the Fate collab serves as an interesting case study on how not to collect 2 beloved franchises together. Before we get into this absolute dumpster fire that the collab turned out to be, we should talk about the warning signs and early failures that led to what would become the most embarrassing collab between 2 high-profile franchises that we've ever seen. Frankly, this was probably the most random mashup conceivable. After the initial hype settled down following the reveal, there was a pretty glaring issue. This wasn't Honkai Star Rail x Fate Grand Order, this was Honkai Star Rail x Fate Stay Night. To avoid getting into yet another Fate Watch Order discourse, Fate Stay Night is the original visual novel, which was later adapted into an awful anime, and later was adapted into a really sick anime, but not nearly as good as Fate Zero. I don't understand why nobody has watched Fate Zero. Aside from the totally necessary to the plot mana transfer scenes, Fate Stay Night has a solid cast of iconic figures. However, the self-contained narrative doesn't exactly leave much space for elaboration. That is to say, it makes really no sense for these characters to just show up in the Star Rail universe. What would make sense, however, would be to tie it in with Fate Grand Order, the gacha game of the Fate series. I have a love-hate relationship with FGO, in the sense that I love hating on that horrible, horrible game. But for all the complaints that I have about the lame-ass gameplay, slideshow graphics, and the worst gacha system known to man, by the way, this game had no hard or soft pity system until well after I quit playing. FGO did 2 things so well that somehow it had me playing it every day for years. Great narratives and even better character writing. So while everyone was hyping the Fate collab up with those expectations in mind, it would quickly become clear that we'd be getting neither of the 2. If there was one thing I could point to on what made the Fate collab a failure, I would say it's the fact that there are only 2 playable characters. Sure, the other stuff was embarrassing as hell, and will take time to properly make fun of it. But there's no excuse for a company of Hoyo's size, in a game as successful as Star Rail, working with a franchise as expansive and beloved as Fate for a collaboration of this scale to only release a total of 2 units. It would be one thing if there was a shortage of characters available or an overall difficulty in translating them into a system like Star Rail, but neither of those are even remotely true. Limiting themselves to Fate Stay Night was a massive missed opportunity to bring in fan favorites in the larger Fate franchise as a whole. But even within Stay Night, there are so many characters that would fit right into HSR. I mean, from the moment it was announced, everyone's first thought was how Clara was gonna get a skin for Berserker, and they could have assembled 9 different kits and their animations just from fan theory crafting alone. Instead, we get the 2 safest, least interesting implementations they could have possibly opted for. So I've barely even gotten started here. What the hell were they thinking with these kits? Archer, who has by far the most interesting concept, is entirely dependent on a dead-on arrival support who nobody pulled for. with terrible eidolons, rigid beyond belief team building, having an entirely single target based kit drop right in the middle of the most AoE-centric meta this game's ever seen. I discussed this in my Archer video, but under no circumstances is that character strong enough that you'd pull on Sparkle's rerun, which is almost certainly what Hoyo's entire strategy for his release was. It really says something when even for a character that they brought from an entirely different franchise, they're still trying to screw over players by making them pull for a limited character they can't be run without whatsoever. Of course, Archer's level of clunkiness and reliance on supports to carry them doesn't even come close to the ultimate Sunday Huohuo merchant herself, Saber. I've had this character in my account for months, and her kit still makes no sense to me. Granted, she's so niche and bad that using her never made sense to begin with, and I practically forgot she's on my account. But still, words simply cannot express how useless this character is. And because I'm always looking to glaze my glorious king, why don't we discuss the prospects of using Saber versus Anaxa? Since they're both win DPS, released at roughly the same time, who typically use nearly the same teammates. I'd say they're about as close as two units could be in terms of application. However, Anaxa has more versatility with his weakness implant and sub DPS potential, better and more consistent multipliers, better single target damage, better toughness shred, a tremendously lower ult cost that has more utility, better skill point economy, better flexibility with teammates, better flexibility with relics, better light cones and eidolons, better ease of use, more aura, and actually has voice lines in English. Conversely, Saber might be better by a microscopic margin in blast scenarios, but then again, only if they're all wind weak. Yet even with all of these weaknesses, the most unforgivable thing about her design is that it's just boring. The animations are incredibly lackluster. She's not fun at all to use, and as a Fate fan, it feels like an intern at Hoyo had skimmed through the anime and came up with a kit on the fly, not bothering to understand anything about her actual lore when developing it. There's nothing about Avalon, nothing related to her alter form, or her 20-something other forms for that matter. Look, I get that I'm giving off heavy nerd emoji vibes, and it's not like they should be expected to implement every single aspect of her character into her kit, but they could have at least made an effort to make something interesting, given the amount of material that they were working with. But no. Just pretty girl with magical sword. This is a limited character, by the way. Oh right, can't forget the fact that both Archer and Saber have their own separate pity for their banners, which still have a 50-50. So losing on their banners means you can still lose the next time you actually pull for a good character, and any pity you might have built up prior doesn't apply, so you're always starting from zero. Not that there's any reason to pull for either of them. This is the exact kind of greed they talk about in the Bible. Yeah, I know what you're gonna say next, but what about the fact that Archer was free? Free-to-play friendly, Genshin can never. I always appreciate Genshin slander, but I'll stop you right there. With how bad these characters are, they should have both been free. It's not like you can use either of them without an account full of premium supports anyways. Okay, even if the characters range from niche to incredibly niche, if the story itself is up to standards that the Fate series itself had previously set, then both Fate fans and Star Rail fans would absolutely be satisfied by it. There's just one problem. The story is absolute garbage. Now, a lot of people watching probably don't know anything about the Fate series, and still don't because the Quest did a horrible job at explaining the universe and an even worse job abiding by its rules. But the Fate franchise isn't that difficult to understand the basics of. A bunch of skilled mages summon a bunch of historical figures who come back to life to fight over the Holy Grail, which grants a wish. You might get stumped with how the male historical figures tend to get turned into girls wearing dubious articles of clothing, but if you can get past that, you're basically there. Naturally, what's made Fate such a compelling franchise is how they're able to create complex, character-focused narratives and explore the philosophies and relationships that each of them have. But you could have given me 33,550,336 predictions for how a Star Rail X Fate quest would go, and not a single one of them would feature Scott from the IPC being the most prominent character. This quest was painful to sit through. Scott's only half serviceable as a rare joke appearance normally, so the fact that he stole nearly all of the screen time that should have been given to, you know, spotlight characters of the Fate franchise would be hilarious if I wasn't a Fate fan who actually cared about this collab. Plus, we only got a total of 3 Fate characters who appeared. 3! Out of the over 30 who make up the Fate Stay Night cast. If this wasn't bad enough, they had basically 0 meaningful interactions with each other or the Star Rail cast, and were completely sidelined in the story for the aforementioned gag character and rando NPCs. There must have been some sort of turf war that broke out during the developments of this collab, because it seems like Hoyo legitimately hates the Fate series. Or at the very least, enough people decided that Fate characters weren't worth giving screen time to, and gave all the development and cool moments to Hoyo characters instead. I won't bother speculating how the idea for this collab was thought up or how it even got approved, but it's obvious that Type Moon made an absurd amount of concessions for it to happen. And it shows in just how poor and Star Rail centered the final product was. I mean, a multi-billion-dollar company like Hoyo didn't bother to even make new locations, and just recycled pre-existing areas from Penacony and Amphorius instead. No new enemies or boss fights, no exploration of Fate lore whatsoever, no English voice acting, no skins, no 4 stars, no mechanics ported over from Fate, arguably no meta characters, absolutely zero reason to pull whatsoever, and the weakest, most half-assed quests they could have possibly thrown together. That was the Fate collab. In a sense though, the collab was fairly successful. A ton of Fate fans got into Star Rail and likely stuck around, which of course means another $1 billion in monthly earnings for Hoyo, which of course will just be funneled into Zenless Zone Zero development. On the other hand, everyone involved got screwed over even harder than Lancer was. The new coming Fate fans who pulled for Saber and Archer are now stuck with barely serviceable DPS black holes and had to watch the humiliation ritual that was the story quest. And people like myself, who unfortunately convinced people I knew that were into Fate to play Star Rail, now has to somehow make up for putting them through all that. Yet the one who took the biggest L was easily Type Moon. I don't even want to imagine how much it must have costed them to get this collab put into Star Rail in the first place. But I do know that not a single Star Rail fan got into the Fate franchise after that dumpster fire of a collab. Because if I wasn't already a Fate fan, based on what I was exposed to, I'd think that it's the single worst franchise in existence. So if there's anything you could take away from this video, it's fuck Tectone, and you better hope that your favorite franchise doesn't get Star Railed like Fate was. Thank you for watching. More Star Rail videos coming soon.
Anyway, $4 a pound.